Hello again, my name is April, and obviously this is part 2 of my short story Requiem of Rosaria. Part 2, but not the conclusion. Everything ran a little bit over what I wanted it to, and the last half actually turned out to be about 16 minutes and 50-something seconds. So I had to clip it down even more, and now there's 3 parts. There's part 1, part 2, and the conclusion. Obviously, you should listen to them all in order, otherwise you're going to be extremely confused. But I do hope that you enjoy the rest of the story. Both of these videos will be up at the same time, because I promised that, I would have the rest of the story up. The print copy is available, and I'll have that available in the link, in the description as a link. So if you want to see what the original story looks like, go ahead and check that out. Also, I'm going to be putting up a video after doing all of this that kind of explains where the story came from and a little bit of the characters that are involved, because there are a few more characters that will come in the conclusion that you're yet to see. Anybody that knows my work knows that I do a lot of stuff that involves the spirit world. So I'm always going to be explaining where those spirits came from and why they're being used in the way that they're being used. I thought that, if people like this, they might like hearing where it came from. So, enjoy the rest of the story. Please leave feedback, and thank you for listening. Rosaria couldn't bring herself to forget the pain on the back of her hand. Couldn't forget the look on her mother's face. It made her stomach toss. A new monster, one that could come into the house, was right there beside her. Sleeping in the same bed, eating the same food. Maybe it wasn't her mother at all. Maybe it was a monster who had taken her form as a disguise. The thought made her even more afraid. Maybe it had happened long ago. Maybe her mother was never really her mother at all. Her fingers clenched in her shirt, the child fighting to repress tremors. If she made it known that she knew, would the monster eat her? Or would she be hit more? What happened to her real mother? Did they take her and eat her like they'd eaten everyone else in the world? When they'd taken over the world, they ate everyone except the people who had gotten into their houses. But over time, those people got eaten too. Those are the stories her mother told her. But wait, if there was never a mother, only a monster, did that mean those stories were fake too? Maybe there were survivors. Maybe she could get help if she could just go outside. But there was nothing outside, nothing but black that only her mother could find her way through. The monsters needed it black, because the light made them sick. If that was the case, maybe her mother wasn't a monster at all. Not completely. After all, she had been in the light of the dining room with her. The next morning came, and she'd slept very little. Her mind was running hot with fearful thoughts. When her mother got up, the child expected her to reach for the light, but the woman only gripped her forehead and stumbled toward the door. "Mama, what about the light?" "Not this morning, honey. Mommy has a headache," she replied. Things began to change. Her mother woke up with headaches a lot, insisting the lights be kept off until they went away. They rarely did. When the lights were on, they were shaded to be kept low. During those times, she usually saw her mother in the kitchen drinking from dark brown bottles that she'd begun bringing home. Her mother said they were just regular drinks, but when Rosaria asked for one, she was scolded. "These are only for adults, Rosaria," the woman said. "These will help me keep you safe from the monsters." It made no sense. If the drinks could help the woman keep her safe, then it only seemed right that she give her some. They could keep each other safe. But when she insisted this, her mother became frightening again, scolding her and sending her to play in her room. The monsters came out more frequently, hitting against the house and causing unseen trouble outside. The crack in the ceiling got no bigger, but the child had more to worry about than something like that. Her mother, the person she trusted all her young life, was becoming one of those creatures that lurked outside. Soon she would have no escape from the monsters, because the only one who could protect her would be one of them. With her knees pulled to her chest, she stared at the wall. She needed to escape. She had to find out if there were others who could help her and keep her safe. The slow change in her mother was even more frightening than the creatures she couldn't see clawing at the roof outside their home. If she could just find some help, maybe they could help make her mother better too. She lay back, closing her eyes and doing her best to take a nap. Her mother rarely wanted to do anything anymore. They didn't play games or do each other's hair. She just seemed interested in the brown glass bottles that were rapidly accumulating around the house. The monster was making her drink those bottles, she was sure of it. Maybe if she dumped it all out, the monster would go away. Or maybe it would attack her and eat her instead. Again she pulled herself into a ball, settling into disturbing dreams. Dreams of a beast resting near a gray surface. A strip that had yellow lines down the middle. The large metal monster lay dead on its side. She was above everything, watching down over the strange scene. Her mother was screaming and crying over the body of a little blonde girl, and inside the dead beast rested a dozen or more of the same brown bottles. Rosaria's eyes jerked open and she leaped out of bed, peering through the utter darkness for any sign of the strange beasts. No, they weren't here, trapped only within the realm of sleep where she hoped they'd stay. She tried to see if her mother was in bed, but with such thick darkness there was no hope of seeing even a moving creature, let alone a still one. She reached into the bedside stand, searching for the slender flashlight kept there. Her hands passed objects big and small, pushing aside each one before they came upon a smooth metal object she sought. Taking in a deep breath, she twisted the top and turned the light on her mother's sleeping face, which instantly twisted up, as if in agony. She took the light away and suppressed a sob with her hand. Now she knew for certain. Rosaria began to plan. More and more often her mother left the house to get brown bottles filled with monster food. During those times she tried to teach herself how the lock worked, little at a time. At first she was too scared to touch the door itself. After a few days of this, she was finally able to lay a hand on it without losing control of her bladder. The next step was more difficult. The lock was much higher than she could reach. She stared up at it with a longing frown, watching it for minutes on end as if it would give up its secrets to her. She'd never be able to reach it without being lifted up somehow. Her hands wrung in her shirt, and she finally broke her gaze away from the lock to look around. The dining room. There were chairs there. She raced into the room and grabbed a chair, pulling on it and dragging the heavy seat across the floor. It made a loud scuffing sound till she got it onto the rug, where it finally fell silent. A new set of problems arose, however. The chair was much more difficult to pull across the rug. She pulled as hard as she could, glancing back to see the chair so close to the door. She took a step back and prepared to pull again, but a rattling at the door made her blood freeze. She ran around to the other side of the chair and pulled, fear giving her new strength. A clattering sounded outside the door, and for a moment the lock stopped wiggling. Again she began pulling, shoving the chair back up to the table and dashing across the house back to her room. A loud grunt came from the other side of the door, and finally it was opened. When it closed, Rosaria stepped outside of the room, seeing her mother stumbling in with more cases of bottles in her hands. "Hello, Mama." Her mother turned around, looking at her and smiling strangely. "There's my good girl." She set down the bottles, stumbling over to her and collapsing to her knees in front of her. "Were you a good girl?" Her words were slurred, and her breath smelled foul. So close to becoming a monster now, she couldn't even speak like a human. Having her so close made the child's stomach tighten, but she kept herself from recoiling. If the monster knew, she'd eat her for sure. "Yes, I was, Mama." She looked around, her eyes fixing on the bottles. "Why do you have so many of those?" Her mother's face pinched and she got up. "What business is it of yours, huh? I get it because I like it. Good girls don't ask questions like that, Rosaria." She pulled her arms close to her chest, shifting from one foot to the other. "Sorry, Mama." Her disposition changed again. A smile spread over the woman's face, and she walked back to her and picked her up. "I'm sorry, sweetie. Mommy isn't feeling so good, okay? This is like medicine. It makes Mommy better. So don't touch it, okay?" She kissed her forehead, leaving behind the same disgusting smell on her skin. "Don't you worry, sweetie pie. It's almost over."